An informative speech. So we need to know what we're doing in speaking to inform. So that's why we're skipping all the way to 15. Okay, so chapter 15. We're going to look at the kinds of informative speeches, and we're going to learn some guidelines that we're going to apply to all of our speeches. So when we are doing an informative speech, we are seeking to increase understanding. We are seeking to convey knowledge. We want people to learn something. We're teaching them something. We're showing them something. And we are not persuading. We are not advocating. We are not trying to convince people of anything in an informative speech. We're simply providing information. And there are 4 categories that we can talk about in terms of informative speaking: objects, processes, events, and concepts. So we're going to talk about these individually, but what do you think a speech about an object might be about?
About the object.
About the object. So what are some objects?
Like a new phone.
Okay, like a new phone. What else? A dog. What else?
A car.
A car. Objects, tangible, visible items. And the textbook puts people, places, animals in this particular category. Now, I don't like to think of a person as being an object, but that's just a category that the textbook has put people under for purposes of informative speaking. So we could do an informative speech about a person, about our favorite actor, our favorite author. We might do a biography. We might do something about what the movies that they make or TV shows that they're in or something to that nature. We can inform people about people, places, and things, anything in a tangible form. So we can have objects that may be like computers, or even this table or the projector or anything like that can fall in this category. And some of your topics, I'm sure, will fall into this category. And speaking of topics, I want to know your topics for your informative speech coming up on Thursday. Okay, I want you to pick topics because your speech is coming up really soon here, and we're going to look at the information in the informative demonstration speech folder for outlining and all of that coming up in the next few days. So you need to have your topic in mind so you can start outlining the speech. So I want to know your topics on Thursday. Okay. Okay, so any other topics you can think of under objects? Places, structures, Grand Canyon, national parks, the Empire State Building. Diseases, illnesses, anything like that is here. Okay. I think this is the example in your textbook. It talks about the Arch, St. Louis. Anybody been to the Arch? It's very interesting. You can feel it move when you're up at the top because of the wind. If it's a windy day, you can feel it sway just a little bit. But you could talk about the base of the arch, the middle of the arch, and then the top of the arch for an informative speech. You could do the Empire State Building the same way, or any other structure or place. So those are object speeches. The next category is called process or processes. This category includes the demonstration speech. The demonstration speech is a type of informative speech, and it's a process speech. And here we're showing a system or a systematic series of actions. So steps in a process, steps in a series, steps in, how to change the oil in the car maybe, or how to swing a golf club, or how to throw a baseball. We could do steps in the process. Can you think of other topics, demonstration topics?
How to bake a cake.
How to build a house, how to bake a cake. What else can you think of? How to saddle a horse, how to ride a horse. All kinds of things like that. Most of the time, these speeches show people how to do something so they can do it for themselves. Sometimes they show how things work so we better understand it. Like the engine in a car. We're probably not going to go out and build an engine, but we can understand it. We can do a demonstration speech to further understand how it works. So 2 different types of demonstration speeches. One to understand it, one so we can go do it ourselves. These will require visual aids. Now, your speech already requires 1 visual aid, but most process speeches will require a number of visual aids, especially if you are trying to teach people how to do things for themselves, how to go home and do this. So if we are going to do how to change the oil in a car, we're not going to get the car in the classroom, right? We're not going to get it through that door. So we use pictures, and we use other objects like the oil filter and the oil and the wrench and those kinds of things to show to our audience the tools that we might need. So we do live objects, real objects, tangible objects that we bring in, but we also use images and pictures. Okay. And if you're going to do a food speech, you will have to use pictures. You can't have food in the classroom, so you'll have to use pictures of each step if you plan on doing something like that for your informative speech. So that's a process speech. Demonstration speech. Think of an infomercial where they tell you about the product, but they also demonstrate how it works. That's the process speech, demonstration speech. Okay. The next category is events. What do you think we might cover? What might be a topic under the category of events?
9/11.
9/11. Sports. Okay, sports activities. What else?
The Grammys.
The Grammys. Concerts. Any kind of an event, any kind of a happening. Okay. You can also do naturally occurring events. What is a naturally occurring event that we might do a speech on?
Earthquakes or hurricanes.
Earthquakes, hurricanes,
Level.
global warming, tides, terrorism would fit under here as long as we're talking about an event. If we're talking about terrorism as an idea, that's going to go in the next category of concept speeches, okay? But if we're talking about a specific terrorist event, then that would go here in this category. So we could do Mardi Gras. We could talk about parades. We could talk about food. We could talk about costumes. And we would give information about an event. We might even do something to the effect of how Mardi Gras is different here in North Louisiana as opposed to Southern Louisiana. The differences in it's more family oriented. It's, smaller in scale, those kinds of things. But we still have a good time, and we could talk about the event from both perspectives. All right. So an event speech. We could do something about sunrise and sunset and photosynthesis and those kinds of things under events. So you could do naturally occurring events as well. And then the last category is concepts. Bless you. Concept speeches are a little more challenging. What is a concept? What's a concept? It's an idea. It's a belief. It's a theory. And we should do concept speeches. We should do speeches about ideas, about theories, because they make really good speeches. But they are also very challenging because we have to be careful that when we're doing an informative speech on a concept, that we don't cross the line into persuasion. And depending on what our topic is, it can be quite difficult to do that, to stay away from persuasion, especially if we're very passionate about the topic. So what are some topics that we might consider under concepts? Any ideas? Discipline. Okay.
They got a football star right now is under scrutiny for his child with a switch.
Mm-hmm.
And right now he's being suspended. They don't know if they're going to reinstate him back in the league, and it's It's all over me.
Okay.
He should have did this or he shouldn't have done that.
And when we get into should words, we get into persuasion. And so if we're going to do a speech under concepts about discipline, child discipline, we would want to provide the facts, the information. We would not want to say, you should discipline this way, or you should not discipline this way. We would simply be giving information and letting the audience decide for themselves what they're going to do. So that's why concept speeches are challenging. What are some other topics that you can think of? What are some challenging ideas, challenging notions?
Like the theory of evolution.
Okay, theory of evolution. If we were going to do that as an informative speech, we would give the facts, we'd give the information. We would not argue for its acceptance or its rejection. Okay. You can do religions under this particular category as long as you only tell us about the principles of that religion or the way that religion works. As long as you're not inviting us to be a member or persuading us to be a member of that religion.
What about politics?
Politics works the same way. You can tell us the difference between a Republican and a Democrat. You can explain what the Republican, platform is or the Democratic platform is. You can explain those kinds of things so that people understand them, but you cannot persuade to be either one, okay, or to vote for a particular candidate. All of that goes under your persuasive speech. And you'll do a persuasive speech. It's just not this speech. Okay, it's coming up. All right, so you don't want to do any persuading in this particular speech. But we should do concept speeches because they make really good topics. They are important to do. I mean, we have to explain what freedom is to people. Freedom is a concept. It's an idea. And in order for other people to understand it, we have to explain it. So we need to do these kinds of speeches. They're important for us to do. So those are the 4 categories: objects, process, events, and concepts. And your topic will fall into one of these particular categories. And it doesn't really matter which one they fall into, as long as it's not a persuasive topic, okay? So there are some guidelines in this chapter, and they call them guidelines for informative speaking. But I want you to apply these guidelines to all of your speeches, okay? Not just your informative speeches. One of those is to not overestimate what the audience knows. Don't underestimate what they know either. So do your audience analysis and make sure you have an idea of what the audience knows about your topic. So you can start at a good place in your speech and giving them good information that's not a repeat of what they already know. We will always relate the subject or relate the topic to the audience, and we will do that in the introduction. You have a 5-part introduction that you will do, and the 3rd part of that is relating the subject to the audience. What does that mean? What are we doing there when we relate the topic to the audience? Why would we do that?
You can get the audience on board with what you're saying.
Okay, you want to get them on board. You want to get them on the same page for sure, right? Okay. You want them to understand what the speech means to them. Remember in audience analysis when we talked about egocentrism and the audience is wondering, what's in it for me? What am I going to get out of it? Well, that's where you tell them. That's where you relate the subject to them so that the audience knows, I'm going to get something out of this that's important. I'm going to get something out that will benefit me, that will benefit my life. So we always relate the topic in the introduction. And then we want to be careful with our language, and we'll talk more about language in the chapter chapter 12, I think, is the language chapter, about being too technical. That's really common sense. You really want to make sure that you use the language that is appropriate to your audience. If you've got an audience full of computer programmers and you're doing a computer programming speech, then you can use that technical language. But if you have a general audience, you need to not use that technical language as much as possible. If you do have to use it, you need to define it and explain it. A couple of other guidelines: you want to avoid being abstract. Now that's hard to do, especially in concept speeches, because concepts are abstract. If you have to be abstract, you want to provide a lot of examples, a lot of comparisons, a lot of contrast to help people understand the abstraction, to make it more concrete for them, to bring it home for them in a real concrete kind of way. Where it says personalized ideas, doesn't mean you have to be personal. Doesn't mean you have to, tell the audience everything about you or your deep, dark secrets or anything like that, but being personable. If you have some ideas that are personalized, then use those in your speech. Use those personal examples if they're appropriate for what you're doing and appropriate for your audience. And be creative. You can write a sentence matter-of-factly and just write the sentence. You can also add to that and be more creative. It helps to keep audience interest as well as to add some pizzazz to what you're saying. So be creative. Be creative in your examples. Be creative in your stories. Be creative in your anecdotes. If you use humor, make sure you are good at telling jokes. I'm not good at telling jokes, so I don't do them. I tell stories, and sometimes I'm not real good at telling stories, and so I'm real careful about the stories that I choose to tell in my speeches. So be careful about those kinds of things and know that you can tell them well, but be creative and go the extra mile, go a step further, okay? So informative speaking is about conveying information. It's about getting the information to the audience in a way in which they can understand it. It's not about persuading. It's not about convincing. Okay. So you're going to do an informative or demonstration speech in the next